Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. This has been such a deeply inspiring, enriching, enlivening experience to hear from so many educators and changemakers from different parts of the world on all of these beautiful solutions that are currently emerging that we can lend our momentum towards and that are already have their own momentum. I feel even more deeply filled with hope than at the beginning of the day, which was pretty hopeful. So opening up this final segment of the day, we will have Anthony Basil Rodriguez with another visual storytelling segment. Anthony Basil Rodriguez is an independent filmmaker, world traveler, ethnobotanist, and storyteller. This work continues to bring Anthony around the world in pursuit of research and documentation of rare plants, disparate peoples, and the flux of global society. He is currently working on a docu-series in production called Growing Back to Nature. Episode 1 will be featuring William Padilla Brown, which we are about to see a teaser clip from. You can also find more of Anthony's work at anthonybrodriguez.com. All right, take it away.
Going out into the forest with no intentions, you realize that you are a part of the ecosystem. It's a living language. It's a symphony of life. It's musical, it's artistic, it's relaxing, it's therapeutic. It's like being part of a living story. My name is William Padilla Brown. I'm a citizen scientist. I am a mycologist or an amateur mycologist, which means I study everything from yeasts that are like in bread and beer and things like that to macro fungi like the mushrooms we'll find at the grocery store or out in the woods and everything in between. The best way to shift our economy is move to a more decentralized system where as citizens we aren't as much of dependent consumers as we are independent producers, and then shift the way that we spend our money. To get the culture at large more involved with these sustainable ideals is to make it sexy, to make it cool, for it to be what you see when you're scrolling through Instagram. You know, attention is the currency of the modern age. Growing Back to Nature is an incredible idea, to be able to connect with individuals that are really making the change and then do it in a way that is incredibly digestible for a viewer. You know, the crew is very skilled and also fun to hang out with, and we relate on a lot of levels, which I think is really important to be able to create a cohesive experience in the recording of this documentary. I wouldn't trade any of this time for the world. It's been a really fun time hanging out with everybody and recording and making sure that it is digestible and will be delivered to everybody. Dude, I'm so happy right now.
The goal of Growing Back to Nature is to tell the stories of individuals making economic, cultural, and lifestyle shifts in the direction to become more harmonious with the natural world. William is a good friend of mine, and I think his story is quite incredible because of who he is and what he represents, and his journey as well. We're just out here with Will. We're filming in the forest. We just found some maitake. We're starting to build a scene of him and his relationship with the forest, as well as showing his son the ropes of the natural world. Yeah, we're almost done with this project. We're working hard. Mustafa's behind on the camera there. Got this mic. You can probably hear me nice and clear. And I can't wait to get this project to you more soon. Okay, now we're going to hear William talk with someone who needs no introduction, Paul Stamets, a speaker, author, mycologist, medical researcher, entrepreneur, and myconaut. He's also a longtime friend of Dennis and an important supporter of the McKenna Academy. Welcome, Paul, and welcome, Will.
William and Paul, thank you both so much for being here. As we gather together this weekend, really holding a council of people and planet and making conscious efforts to return to a symbiotic relationship with nature. The two of you are holding a space as emissaries of the fungi kingdom. We have many plant people here. We have people who are working with each other in more of social permaculture settings. And so within that context of being emissaries of the fungi kingdom, in this conversation of how do we as a multi-species community consciously regain our agency and return to a symbiotic relationship with the rest of nature. What comes up for you in speaking to that space, and what role do you feel that the mushrooms are playing in this return?
That's a great question. Did you want to go first?
No, you go ahead, please.
All right. Well, I think as an emissary for the fungi and kind of returning to this more natural lifestyle, I think the fungi play an important role as what I've liked to call the hooked on phonics of ecology. I've found over the years of taking people out into the woods and looking for mushrooms, and in my own experience, coming from a background of not being in nature as much and more in cities, that when an individual goes out into the forest looking for mushrooms, they inherently become aware of more of the ecology than they went out there for. When you're looking for mushrooms, you have to know different associations with trees. You have to know the way that the ecosystem is moving, the type of ecosystem it is there water flowing through it? And all of these aspects will lead you to the mushrooms. And I find as people go out specifically looking for mushrooms, they end up knowing what kind of trees are in their area, or they end up knowing just the lay of the land just by walking through it. So I really think that mushrooms are kind of like the gateway into nature for a lot of individuals that didn't take a different pathway and other means. And their role that they play in everything that's changed, everything I think is a role of a blueprint for social settings, for cultural settings, for the way that we move through our more human ecosystem, as they've stood the test of time and they've been here for thousands upon thousands, millions of years. And in that time, they've developed incredible ways of living in symbiosis with the ecosystems in which they function. As we understand the role of fungi as decomposers in the ecosystem, I also like to think of them as composers, as they are composing a symphony of life, starting up from the soil and moving through the ecosystem. So I think that we could utilize biomimicry type skills to watch fungi, understand more of their interaction with the ecosystem, and then apply that to the way that we're living now to create more harmonious ecosystems, or more harmonious human systems utilizing permaculture principles and things along that line.
Yes, a fantastic description. And I would add on to that is the interest in mushrooms right now is a worldwide phenomenon. It's cross-cultural. It's stretching all over the planet. There's a renewed interest in the field of mycology. I describe it as a revolution from the mycelial underground. There's such a surge in interest. Even the graduate schools are inundated now with applications from students who want to enter into the field of mycology, heretofore unprecedented. So many of those departments were struggling just to populate a single class, and now the classes are over-enrolled. Hundreds of people are showing up on anything related to mushrooms, really. And so I think William and I are part of a worldwide revolution. And the beauty of the interest in mushrooms, that it's a common bridge that holds us together as peoples of diverse backgrounds, diverse ethnic backgrounds, political backgrounds. And it is a sort of a unifying web of interests that we're all sharing in. I see this as the beginning of a new earth movement, a new way of people rising up to take back control of the narrative that has unfortunately gotten us into a huge mess right now, which is continuing to get worse. But with that challenge and with a focus now on ecology, and I, like William, it's very true. Mushrooms get you back in touch with nature. And I see every time that you reach down to touch a mushroom or to pull it up, you're encountering this vast mycelial network underneath. And anyone out there familiar with this, just go out into the woods and find a log on the ground or a piece of wood and tip it over. The mycelial networks are virtually everywhere. They're just underneath your feet. just underneath the surface, typically, of the soils, and these vast membranes are really the foundation of the food web. They set up the microbiomes. They set up the guilds of cooperating organisms. And I like to say that the lesson of evolution that I have learned is not the survival of the fittest, but it's the extension of generosity, of surplus, so that individuals who can share resources with those who don't have as much. And that community of sharing, the abundance or surplus beyond one's needs, builds a community of mutual symbiosis. And that's the lessons of fungi. That's the lessons, I think, that we have all come to learn. And Will talks about, I've been a naturophile, I've been embedded in the woods my life, for the most part, ever since I was 8 years old. My twin brother and I worked out in the woods, and we had 2 different posses of friends, and we would play capture the flag and all sorts of crazy things, Did things back then that you couldn't do today. But I like the idea of also, going into the woods, you're picking mushrooms. And the other challenging aspect of it is when you're in a city, you might have Pennsylvania Avenue and 15th Street, and you've got a grid that's very, very linear and very, very square. You go out into nature, and there's no right angles, very rarely. I mean, you're suddenly, when you get off trail, you orienteer. You suddenly are demanding upon yourself a new sense of direction, of orienteering, of reading the landscape so you don't get lost. Even though William and I, I'm sure, have gotten lost many times, we've all found our way back. Just understanding that, you're in a different ecosystem with different rules, and you need to be a student of nature, because nature ultimately bats last. The bases are loaded, and nature bats last, and it's time for us to respect the natural world that's given us our origins.
That was great. As you were speaking, I was thinking of I've put a lot of focus of my work, aside from the scientific work that I do, on integrating more individuals into these kinds of communities. And I've found that more people have more reverence and respect for the natural world when they have a reason to care about it, because a lot of people living in their city monotonous lifestyles that have that disconnect don't really have anything tangible that they care about that connects them to the natural world. And I find when somebody just tries that wild mushroom for the first time and they're like, whoa, this is delicious, this just grows outside, or even more so when they find it for themselves and they get that rush of being out in the forest and finding those mushrooms, I think gives more people a reason to care about it. And you'll always try and protect something that you truly care about. And I was also thinking about, in my own experience, how growing up, I thought that so much was already discovered, but getting into the field of mycology, realizing that there was so much that's undiscovered. And we've been out here picking mushrooms that have already been deemed as, this is the best, these are the good edibles, or these are the good medicinals. But I've found in my own work and in my own forays into the forest, mushrooms that are incredibly understudied, that in my own beliefs, with nothing backing it, I believe that they have incredible potentials. And I wanted to know, what do you think about that for people that are getting into the field of mushrooms and looking for something to really care about, or looking for something to hold on to? What are your thoughts on the potentials of new discoveries with fungi and mushrooms?
Well, I think that this is a very interesting new ecosystem for communities. So much of us feel apart from our communities. It's a struggle to make connections. And when you have different groups coming together, sharing their love, interest in mushrooms, and this eureka experience, which is an endorphin rush, this probably is addictive, because when you find a new species or a new cluster of chanterelles or something, you have this eureka experience. It's an endorphin rush, and it's very enjoying. And then you want to share, at least within your your tight family. So sometimes mushroom patches are totally top secret and you don't want to share with anybody. But I think that this is a way of building, a new way of building community. And I, have met people and have befriended people who are on the absolute other end of the political spectrum, their religious spectrum. I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. And yet they've become some of my best friends. And because of our common interest in mushrooms and foraging and this eureka experience and sharing our joy of mushrooms, we've built a communication bridge that would not otherwise have occurred. And the commonality of our interest is protecting the ecosystem so we have more mushrooms. Well, that leads into sustainability, biodiversity, permaculture, how we can guarantee our food supply for future generations. The loss of habitats is the loss of our access, to these experiences that we share with our family and friends that are so central. And so many people have told me two things. People in the 80s and 90s have told me their most favorite memories is when they were a child hunting mushrooms with their parents. They were closer to the ground. They were rewarded for their attention of their parents, their excitement, the shared excitement of finding things. And they were away from the business. Hopefully back then didn't have iPhones and Droids, but they had the center of attention was that shared experience of excitement and adventure. It really is an adventure. Going out into the woods, you have no idea what you're going to find. You have hopes, but then nature surprises you constantly with bizarre things. I have Hypomycete lactiflorum, the lobster mushroom, which is a parasitic fungus on an otherwise not so great mushroom called Russula brevis, a white mushroom. It's called brevis because it has the short white foot. And William, for over 10 years, it has come up in the exact same spot, Mossy Road on my property. I mean, WTF, I would think a parasite would wander around, but the fact that the lobster mushroom is in the same square meter of ground and the healthy Russula comes up, brilliant and white, and then it's taken over and that transforms this otherwise sort of bland white mushroom into something that's a delicacy. And so it just boggles my mind because, we talk about saprophytes and mycorrhizal species, but it's resident. It's resident there for the long term. And once you have a mushroom patch, then you can go back to it year after year after year and share it. Now I have expectation anxiety, is it gonna come up or not? Where is it? When is it going to come? And then it showed up this week. I go, great, you're back. So, but what I'm getting at is that there's not only is there a strong interest and a strong need, but the time is so important that we reinvest in the biodiversity of nature. The loss of biodiversity, the loss of ecosystem health is creating zoonotic diseases, COVID being one of them, bird flu, swine flu, other viruses, even Ebola. These are all collisions of natural systems on the margins of denatured systems that have been lost biodiversity, overpopulation, the crowding of factory farms and factory animals. And at those margins of those colliding ecosystems, one of which has homeostasis, the other which one has been discombobulated and destabilized, that's when these opportunistic vectors of disease leap out because the ecosystems we're creating from human activity do not have homeostasis, do not have equilibrium, losing the safeguards of the organisms that have kept this and kept the ecosystems in check. I don't have staph bacteria on us. Well, if you're immunocompromised, then staph bacteria can become an infection. It can kill you. Well, our body ecosystem is also reflective of the ecosystem in nature. When we start taking antibiotics against one bacterium, then we could actually lose the check and balances of that bacterium holding another bacterium in check. And then you end up getting opportunistic infections of non-targeted organisms from your activity. We're inflicting, random anti-biologicals against nature in our need to make money or the capitalistic system in general would regard to the rights and the roles of other organisms in the ecosystem. And cutting down the forest is a classic example. Can we measure should we measure the forest simply in timber board feet of lumber? Or is the measure of a forest more than that? Well, I think everyone would recognize, most everyone would recognize the ecosystem of the forest should have other economic metrics besides timber board feet of lumber. It's clean water, it's biodiversity, it's recreation or your family going into the woods. We have really underestimated the value of nature by only cherry picking one metric that can be monetized without giving equal credit or value to the other organisms that will be lost should we selectively cut down the forest. So, Will, what do you think?
I mean, it was interesting as you were speaking out right before you started mentioning the value of the forest. I was thinking if more people knew the value of a diversified forest, would that because I mean, our country here specifically, and a lot of other countries I've been to, operate mostly based off capitalism and individuals with large pockets that are capable of hiring lobbyists to make decisions that would affect things like that. So I was just on that same mental pattern. And I've also had this idea that homeostasis will not be achieved without symbiosis with local systems. And I'm talking about like a personal homeostasis, like whether the systems are ecological or social. And I kind of see it growing out like the mycelium from the spore and radiating outwards with individuals and examples, which I've seen, and I know you've probably seen more than me as we travel and integrate into these spaces where individuals have taken the initiative to create more of a homeostasis in their own system and with their community. And this is something that I want to see more broad scale. I feel like that mycelium is growing fairly slowly as it reaches out. And I think we need more strong examples of individuals and community. I think that's where it becomes more powerful. And I'm not thinking like community, like a commune of individuals living out on a farm somewhere where it's more isolated. I'm thinking about integrating it into the towns that we're living in. So people that aren't necessarily into all this right now will experience the effects and the ripples of that. So that's where my mind was going. And I don't know, I mean, kind of like, what were you going to say?
Well, you've been a real leader in the urban agriculture movement, bringing the knowledge of cultivating mushrooms into urban neighborhoods, and I think that's really quite unique. That's a very unique position, is getting people in urban environments interested in cultivating mushrooms.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch. When I started cultivating mushrooms here, I was the only one in like miles. The closest other farms were over in Kennett Square, which is like almost 2-hour drive from where I am. And since then, with the education, there's 5 other mushroom farms around where I live now. And that's amazing. And that integration also hits because when I first started selling mushrooms here, there a large portion of the community that would come across me at various farmers markets didn't even know what to do with the mushrooms. So that also took a while of integration and education. And I think we're at a really beautiful point where there are so many more mushroom farms popping up all around them. And we're at this unique turning point where we become a culture of mycophiles. We become a culture of mycophagous humans, you know, as more people start to eat them, because we kind of, as people migrated here, as more people began to live here, kind of a lot of individuals lost the traditions of their homeland and the use of mushrooms. So not many people know what to do with them. So I think we're at this really unique turning point where more people are getting access and seeing people like you on various social media avenues or various media outlets, and getting more interested in it. I think that's critical to making the first steps into more of a symbiotic relationship with fungi and a symbiotic relationship in general. Yeah.
it also and experts within communities to become the knowledge center, the nexus point to be able to spread information. I was just interviewed by Al Jazeera Network, and it's 35 million people viewing the interview, and there's and the pre-interview, the person asking me questions, and I was talking about there are mycophilic people all over the world, but they're centers, and it may be because someone like William inspires some students, and then they become teachers of students and teachers of teachers, and it emanates out from a next point like William. And then he creates a community of knowledge of people who have been introduced to this. Well, William, without you, the adverse is true. Think about all the people who would not know about mushrooms if you were not involved. Well, I bring this up because in Western Africa, there is a long, long history of use of collecting edible mushrooms, but not in Eastern Africa. And the woman was interviewing me, she's from East Africa, and she said, if I told my parents that I'm interviewing somebody about mushrooms, they would not even understand. And I said, well, that's really interesting because in Western Africa, there's a long tradition. So I quickly pulled up several research papers and sent it to her, a long ethnomycological history in Western Africa collecting mushrooms. And she was astonished that this history had not spread across the continent. Well, there's ecosystem differences and everything else, but I think it speaks to these knowledge centers, these nexus points of individuals. And we're the perfect example of the new leadership in this revolution from the mycelial underground. There is a strong need. And mushrooms are, and the mycelium is more than just a metaphor. It's now a new way of life. It's a new way of being. It's a new way of contacting nature and hopefully making us a little bit more humble and understanding that we're in the back seat, on this earthship, in that we have this hubris and this deception that we're driving the system. We might be driving our own self-destruction, but ultimately, this planet will go on whether humans exist or not. 99.999, et cetera, % of species have become extinct. The destiny ultimately of any species is extinction. We will give birth to other species, we'll diverge genomically, but we should be very concerned right now about viral pandemics and the loss of ecosystem integrity, because we have COVID-19 now. Well, for many years, us that have been studying this subject are very concerned about bird flu, H5N1, swine flu, H1N1, which we know in 1918 ravaged the world. Well, we're not going to just have a single viral pandemic. It is highly likely that we'll have a convergence of many viral pandemics. And we don't have viral storms now, we have viral hurricanes. And they're on the near event horizon. They're coming at us. They're coming at us from distressed ecosystems, and the factory farms are the most probable vector of the next viral pandemic. What happens when we have 4 or 5 simultaneous COVID-like viral hurricanes attacking us at once? This is all hands on deck. And this is why I think the Earth citizens need to rise up to protect the ecosystems that have given us birth. Because without them, the ecosystems will reject us as a pathogenic species. That's just the way of nature. When an organism exceeds the carrying capacity of its ecosystem, zoonotic diseases knock down that overpopulating species and returns back to a state that is more sustainable. And so I think us humans living apart from nature is really a dangerous set of mindset. It's a dangerous mode of activity and behavior. And so what I see the mushroom community doing is bringing a lot of us together and sort of in a very subtle way, in many ways, converting a lot of people into environmentalists. So this is the way of the mycelium and the mushroom speaking through us.
It seems that like some people will listen to what you just said and find fear in what you said about being in these viral hurricanes. which is okay, because I mean, this is just a reality that we're in. Fear is an acceptable response to some of these things. And a lot of the issues are stemming from humans acting as a pathogenic or a harmful organism in our ecosystem. And I feel a lot of that has to do with the current mindset of humans, and the way that we think. And I just wanted to ask you, with this oncoming drug-assisted psychotherapy renaissance that we have upon us, with all of these initiatives that are coming around our country for the decriminalization of psychoactive plants and fungi. What do you think the role of psychoactive fungi will be in aiding the mental state of humans around the world in these coming years?
Well, I've given a lot of thought to this, and let me kind of factually back up what I'm about to say. There is an app that we have co-developed. It's called microdose.me. I announced it on the Joe Rogan show, over 12,000 subscribers. Basically, it measures microdosing. And the app has multiple ways of measuring the effect or non-effect of microdosing. Microdosing is taking a subsensorian, a below the threshold dose of psilocybin shrooms or other psychoactive substances where you don't feel the effect. So with psilocybin cubensis, about 1 gram, you feel an effect. 1/10 of a gram, you don't, dried weight. So we have now mined the data. We're writing an article for a peer-reviewed article with a number of other researchers, Zach Walsh being the primary lead PhD researcher. And we have just unveiled the research results, which are just extraordinary. Now, also, microdose.me, you don't have to be a microdoser. You just measure your memory, your eyesight, your hearing. There's all sorts of well-proven psychological tests that have been used in psychotherapy and psychiatry to measure one's mental state of being, and also measurements that relate to neuropathy, the degeneration of your neurological state. And the results have been phenomenal. And this is so interesting because we have found now that independent of the variability of psilocybin content in mushrooms bought on the quote-unquote black market, independent of the individual sensitivity, and independent of the microdose range, the data is showing with statistical significance about p-values of significance. A p-value 0.05 is 95% confidence the data is real. 5% margin of error perhaps. But our p-values are 0.00001 and greater. So in the field of science, we have 4 zeros, in a p-value. It is just absolutely certain the evidence is so strong. And we're finding this with literally thousands of participants. It's the largest meta-study ever done. And from this meta-study, then clinicians and clinical researchers then can go ahead and refine and be more targeted in controlling the dosage, the individuals, and other factors that might be confounders. But even with these confounders I've mentioned, the p-values of significance are hugely powerful. So now this relates specifically because wandering through the academic journals, I thought, well, okay, so our analysis shows massive decrease in depression, massive decrease in anxiety, increase in positive mood. So I wanted to know, how does depression and anxiety affect immunity? What's the bridge between the two? And I just hit a huge gold mine of research articles in the Lancet, the New England Journal of Medicine, et cetera. It turns out it's bidirectional for the research that's been published. When you are immunologically depressed, interesting, there's a strong correlation to emotional depression, but vice versa. It's bidirectional. When you are suddenly happy, maybe you're depressed and someone threw you a surprise birthday party, or something, and someone gave you an artist kit, and you haven't done art in years, but you had just a positive experience. The next day, you decided to be an artist, and you went, "Holy moly, I'm better than I thought I would be." The day after that, you're excited to pick up to work on your art project. Suddenly, you have happiness that leads to creativity. Creativity leads to happiness, and the correlation is your immune system increases. So the psychological state of being affects the physical state of being. The mind-body connection that Dr. Andrew Weil and so many other people have talked about is real. And so what I see now is that since these psychotherapeutic benefits of psilocybin, macrodoses and microdoses with ayahuasca, with many other psychoactive substances, if this does actually change your mind into a more positive emotional landscape, it does increase immunity. Now, this is much better than herd immunity by being exposed to a virus, which one physician described, I think, today as genocide. The idea of herd immunity for a COVID virus means millions and millions of people will die, as opposed to have a more precautionary and medically well thought out approach. But one aspect of this herd immunity that makes sense to me is the widespread use of psychotherapeutic substances such as psilocybin increases your emotional well-being, and in doing so increases your immunity. So this is where we're going to dig down now, because the microdose.me, we're headed towards 100,000 people. This is a huge statistical data set. This is not N of 12 or N of 10s, and which is very common in preliminary studies. So we're offering this data set to researchers so they can further refine this. But I think this leads to increase in community immunity by the use of psilocybin mushrooms. At microdosing, even people who don't want to get high, everyone wants to be happier. Everyone wants to be more creative. Everybody wants to have a better immunity. So there's a commonality of interest that these mushrooms bring to the table that are heretofore not been recognized by the medical establishment, but is being recognized very rapidly now.
Yeah, I mean, as within, so without. Once we create that healthy landscape inside, I think more people will take the time to create that healthy landscape outside. I'm really excited to see the effects on our country as this becomes more accessible on a larger scale, as more humans achieve sustainable happiness. And I personally believe, from my own experiences and the experiences of friends, in the ability of these kinds of therapies in aiding individuals out of dependency on pharmaceuticals to maintain some level of emotional stability. So I'm really excited to see on a larger scale how we start interacting with each other, and how humans start interacting with the landscape once they feel better, and I've been thinking, especially this year, if you aren't depressed or you don't have some sort of mental quandary at this point in time, you might be very disconnected, because our whole planet is going through a lot right now. We as humans are going through a lot right now, and if you're connected and you're tapped in, you're gonna feel it, because we aren't separate from what's happening. We aren't separate from the earth. We aren't separate from each other. So I think we all pain together. When the earth is hurting, we're hurting as well, whether or not we're paying attention to it. And I'm a big proponent of heal yourself first. People ask me over and over again, like, how did you figure out all of this? How did you get into this? And I had to figure out how to do better for myself. I had to figure out how to heal myself first before I could start projecting that and working with that into the, without me and outside of me. Yeah, this has been, I feel like I always enjoy our conversations. I feel just as much or more than the listeners. So I've kind of been just.
I have one slide I want to show, and if can I give you share screen, Genevieve? I'm going to try to do that if I can. It looks like it's going to work. Let's see. You're screen sharing now. Can you see that now?
Yep.
You can?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I want to make sure I'm not screwing up here.
It's showing the whole thing instead of a big screen.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yeah, it's showing from presenter view.
Okay. It should be full screen. Is it full screen with you or not?
I don't see it as full screen. I don't know if they are as well. She said use slideshow.
The slideshow. Well, okay. Well, thank you. There you go.
Cool. There we go.
I learned something new on Zoom. Oh, we're on Zoom so much. Okay, well, I want to show this because these are the North American academic centers involved in psilocybin research today. So for those people who are not familiar with the work that Will and I are very familiar with, these are academic institutions doing clinical studies on psilocybin in the United States and North America. They've gone through the IRB, institutional review boards, past physicians and experts, foremost looking at safety, whether the science is evidence-based and justifies these clinical studies, and whether there's a clinically relevant possibility of a positive outcome, considering the targeted illness, mental illness in this case for the most part, is not being serviced currently by other psychotherapeutic drugs. Well, psilocybin fits all those, check boxes. But this is really important that people see this. Johns Hopkins, Stanford, Harvard Medical School, Yale University, New York School of Medicine, University of San Francisco, UCLA, Mount Sinai. This is a phenomenal number of universities that have been approved by the FDA to clinically prescribe psilocybin. So this is just not a one-off. And Will and I are well familiar with sometimes being challenged because we have one exceptional result. Well, novelty by definition means you have an exceptional result. But it's the leaders to this new frontier of knowledge that oftentimes are so heavily criticized. Dennis McKenna and myself being in that camp. And now we're so gratified that so many other experts have come to validate scientifically what Dennis, myself, and Will and the leaders in this movement have passionately believed in. But Will and I, and Dennis, not so much Dennis, he's always been out front, but Will and I have sort of have mollified our messages on psilocybin in order to appeal to the broadest community of people about the excitement of mushrooms. So we want to bring people in for edible mushrooms, the experience, etc. But this segues over time and familiarity to bridge the conversation into psilocybin mushrooms. And we have to do it responsibly with discipline, set and setting, all the tools that we've learned from indigenous people, also from the academic institutions that have been testing this. So I just want to bring this to your attention because this is not just Dennis McKenna and Paul Stamets and Wade Davis and Will Padilla talking about this. There's literally thousands and thousands of researchers now that are recognizing this as being some of the most powerful therapeutic medicines ever studied in the history of psychiatry. I believe psilocybin mushrooms make for nicer people. I believe that it increases intelligence. And our research also soon to be published shows that the psilocybin mushroom analogs increase neurogenesis, causes brain neurons to increase in their downstream cell development, more neurons, more synapses, more connections, that leads to better integration of ideas, more intelligence, more creativity. So we are publishing that in the next several months. And this is why I think the psilocybin mushrooms are different and more beneficial than psilocybin as a pure pharmaceutical. All these institutions were using a pure pharmaceutical because of the FDA requirements, and they're looking for the magic bullet, the single molecule that causes an effect. The entourage effect is the way of nature. These other psilocybin analogs have also genetic benefits. And then by consuming these psilocybin mushrooms, I believe the entourage effect, like Will talks about symbiosis, it has a much more positive effect on our mental ecosystem than a single species. And also, I think it speaks to people medicine versus profit medicine. No matter what, if these substances become legalized by prescription or otherwise, 99% of the people out there will be consuming psilocybin mushrooms. That's just a fact. This is not going away. So just because pharmaceutical grade psilocybin is going to be available doesn't mean that 99% of people needing them are going to use them. Psilocybin mushrooms are very inexpensive, very easy to grow, and there's a long cultural use. There's not a long cultural use of psilocybin until just recently. You can make the argument that in these university cultural ecosystems, there's now a cultural use in history. But that's very, very recent. That's only in the past few years, whereas the use of psilocybin mushrooms goes back thousands of years across the planet. And so I'm going to say something controversial here, if I may.
Let's go.
Well, it all came to light because of the decriminalization movement, and the decrim, one of the entities associated with it, let me put it that way to be generous and fair, included peyote without consulting the Native American church, where peyote is a sacrament and they've been legally able to use it. There is an ethnocentricity, and I mean that in a positive way. The history of the use of psilocybin is really localized in first peoples of the Southwest North America, in the desert and more arid environments. Whereas psilocybin mushrooms, there's 116 psilocybin positive species in the genus Psilocybe. That means there's 116 species that grow all over the world. And we have evidence of them being used in Africa and Europe. Of course, Mexico, we know about that. But it seems to me that, if I may, and this will be controversial, and I apologize if I'm offending anyone in advance, but let's leave peyote to the people who use it historically religiously. Psilocybin mushrooms have been used by, who knows, hundreds of cultures perhaps, all over the world. These species is not localized to one species. There's more than 116, several dozen of them have been documented to be used, in different cultures. And so I think psilocybin mushrooms is a bridge for these psychoactive substances. And I think the argument is sound to leave in the domain of First Nations and First Peoples the use of peyote, because it's so ethnocentric to their religion, to their history, and to their ecosystem. Psilocybin mushrooms are totally different. So that was my controversial statement. I welcome to be disagreed with, but I'm coming from a place of compassion, and I just think it's important to protect indigenous knowledge. And I will make the statement, William, you are indigenous, I am indigenous. We're all indigenous to the planet Earth. But at the same time, within our indigenous cultures, we have unique histories, unique cultural practices, unique islands of knowledge. And what has happened from conquest, from religion, and from war, and from disease, so much of this indigenous islands that existed shrunk and disappeared, and we lose people like William, for instance, that had he continued this practice, he would have affected thousands of people, and thousands of people. But if William was espousing this, or I was espousing this 400, 500 years ago, I mean, the Catholic Church or the other religions could have hung me, killed me because of my threatening monotheism, their predominant religion. So I'm thankful to live in this time, but at the same time, I think it's really important that we respect indigenous rights. And when they're this ethnocentric like peyote, I think it's really important that the psychedelic community supports the Native Americans and First Peoples in protecting their heritage, because that heritage is really very well intact, but extraordinarily threatened, even by the psychedelic movement. So that's my controversial statement. that's what I feel is my personal opinion. I know other people have different opinions, so that's it.
I don't think it's that controversial. I mean, I've been seeing a lot about people poaching peyote, and it's becoming an issue because it might not be where it used to grow anymore. So I don't think that's that controversial, but we'll see. We'll see what people say. Yeah, what an exciting time to be alive. It is important. I feel like the way I felt about cannabis as I was younger, and I knew it was going to be legalized, and I knew it was going to be medicinal and all these kinds of things. It opened me up to feel safer about being involved with it when I lived in a place that wasn't necessarily okay with that, which led to issues. And so I just want to just put that out there for people. Although this is becoming more to light, just remember to tread lightly. You know, it is becoming okay and recognized as okay by various areas in our country. But just remember to tread lightly with all of that. And another thought that had come to mind as you were speaking is I'm also very excited to see the way that the experience with these substances changes in the individuals as they're in a place where it's okay to be doing so. Because I know a lot of even with cannabis and with psychoactive substances, including psilocybin mushrooms, the set and setting is so important. When you're taking it in the set and setting of a culture or a state that disapproves of what you're doing, which gives you some level of thinking that you're doing something wrong, that can really inhibit the experience or produce an experience of paranoia or something else undesirable. So I'm really excited to see how the experiences change for individuals as they're in a set and setting of a culture that's approving of the use of these substances.
Well, you nailed that. When I first did psilocybin mushroom, the dark side would show up. During the Nixon era, during the authoritarian suppression. And the war on drug was really, they threw so many ethnic and minorities into the same bucket. The jazz community in New Orleans, pioneered the use of cannabis. And so the anti-civil rights forces, the anti-environmental activist forces, so the environmental movement, the civil rights movement, the gay movement, it was interesting. These conservatives used the war on drugs and threw us all into the same bucket because it was very convenient then to target multiple threats that would shake their control in society and just weaponize the use of cannabis, the use of other, naturally occurring substances, and they could then vilify us and target us with their authoritarian tools, of suppression and imprisonment and persecution. So when I was doing psilocybin mushrooms in the 70s, it was a war going on, a cultural war of the people standing up, trying to fight the man, because they were involved in harming our friends and harming the very ideals that we stood for, and with the mushrooms, so I think helped us appreciate. And now when I do psilocybin mushrooms, I'm more concerned about biodiversity, pandemics, the survival of humanity, building communities. I don't have the dark side showing up, that I had in the 1970s. So we are at a sort of a new higher threshold, I think, as a platform for leap off into the paradigm shift of consciousness that we so desperately need.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, I'm lost in my thoughts a little bit right now. Taking all this in a time where I'm trying to reintegrate, and as I feel most of us are, in utilizing this conversation to kind of drive some ideas moving forward. I wanted to ask before our time runs up if Christina, if she wanted to ask her question that she had earlier, because I know Genevieve asked hers, but Christina didn't. Oh, there you go. She had the same question as Genevieve. All right.
And what is the question?
It was the question. It was our first question. Well, Paul, do you have any questions for me? I feel like we've been kind of bouncing around here.
Well, brother Will, I'm on a remote island in Desolation Sound in British Columbia. I haven't hugged people for months. I've been in isolation for 6 months now. My bubble is 4 people, and 3 of them are gone. So I'm here alone for a week by myself. I mean, connecting with you and seeing you just brings me great joy. So I want to invite you to this remote island post-COVID. You know, we have a meeting of the minds, and we're trying to chart, you know, collectively and using our individual skill sets, charting to a better future. But it's of such paramount importance that we pass knowledge on to the next generation of leaders. And so I can just truly and deeply say that I appreciate and love what you're doing. I want to be able to help in any way I can. So this knowledge base continues forward. We have threads of knowledge through time that have been cut. And for those of you who have not studied the loss of the library in Alexandria, you know, almost 2,000 years ago, estimates of over 100,000, perhaps 1 million textbooks and other codaliths were stored in the largest library in the world. And it was burned down by Christians who saw it as a threat to their society. And other religious groups also participated. I mean, I'm not going to throw all the Christians into one category. But where would we be today if that library had not been burned? You know, now we have libraries of knowledge, and people like you, Will, and other people around the world. It's really important that the community supports these leaders whose ethics are aligned, you know, for the benefit of the commons. And we'll all make mistakes. We all have rooms for improvement. But I think it's our time now to take back the narrative. So the rising up of the earth people will help protect the ecosystem for everyone, even for the generations of people who do not agree with us. We are trying to protect your children, your children's children, you know, so give us a seat at the table. Let our voices be heard, because the voices that we are trying to, and the message we're trying to send are something that will benefit your own descendants, potentially hundreds, if not thousands of years into the future. So anyhow, I want to thank you all. I need to run. I got extra duties here. And you'll appreciate this, Will. I have to do some cloning of some very small mushrooms, and they're starting to dry out. And folks who don't know this, when you have small mushrooms and they're drying out, you've got to clone them right away, or else you lose them. And I have some very rare species I need to get into my laboratory and get them in the culture before they dehydrate. So the mushrooms are calling me to get back to work. So
good luck. This was great talking to you. It always is. And I'll be in touch and, you know, propagate myceliate.
Okay. And thank you, Guinevere and Christina, and thank you, Dennis McKenna Academy, for sponsoring this, and hopefully lots more to come. This is a revolution from the mycelial underground.
Thank you, everyone, for being here so much. I have this deep level of inspiration. It's been incredible to see the chats going and to see all of you participating and contributing. Thank you to all the speakers from today. This is going to be quite a lot to integrate and digest, which is one of the great things that we have these replays available, so you can come back and get further notes on things. On our website, we have all of these resources that these speakers have been listing, so please go there. And I'm just filled with so much gratitude for all of you. Thank you so much. This has been an incredible first day of the Symbiosis Symposium, and just want to thank all of you as participants for coming here today and for responding to that call in your heart and wanting to be a part of this change and wanting to have your voice heard and to hear voices of others. Thank you for making this event possible with your contributions. We appreciate you so much. And thank you to the speakers for bringing these gems of wisdom, for cultivating lives that would allow you to come and share with such rich depths. Thank you so, so much. Thank you to the McKenna Academy team of coordinators and volunteers. We have Christina Chaya, Abby Navarro, Annaliese Hordern, Hugo Santos, Anthony Basil Rodriguez, James McKenzie, Seth Warner, Mike Tuscherer, and Paul Garrett. Thank you all so, so much. Again, replays will be available of this event. If any of you were around for some of the sessions where we were having some technical difficulties, we do have backup recordings with clear audio, and so we will be editing those and reposting them in the replays. So this event space, you can come back and continue to mine these gems in this area. There's been so much goodness shared today. Please come back tomorrow. We're going to have another incredibly empowering day. Wisdom drops, action-oriented pathways forward. We're going to welcome Abhijat, Mark Ian Barash, Pandora, Starhawk. We'll also have Anthony Basil Rodriguez again, sharing more video interludes. We'll have Larry Santoyo speaking, Annaliese Hordern, and a panel with Jaye Irving and Taj Scicluna. And then we'll also have a panel with Aaron Young, Robin Clayfield, Robina McGarty, and Machu Tehuki, followed by a closing talk with Dennis McKenna and Alexandre Tanu. Wonderful. Well, we hope to see you there. Thank you so much. This has been incredible so far. And I am going to welcome on my co-hosts, Dennis McKenna and Annaliese Hordern. Hello, how are you both doing?
Well, I'm doing fine. I'm a little tired. I feel like my head's about to explode. Actually, we've downloaded and heard all these incredible talks. There's a lot of material to process here. And my God, I had no idea, that there would be so much information. Well, I kind of expected it. I'm delighted. It seems that we have heard from so many different people and so many different perspectives, people that are very hands-on, working locally to get things done, to apply these principles, and also people that have, I would say, that global perspective and even that cosmic perspective, and sometimes these are the same people. So other than the technical steps at the beginning, which is nobody's fault, this is to be expected. Technology is always going to turn on you at the last minute. You can't trust it. We overcame, and thank you for that, Genevieve and Anthony and James, all the people providing technical support. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it. The Academy, I think this experience, for those who participated, you get a very much better idea what the Academy is about. It's a place for sharing ideas and synergizing our collective wisdom and really developing a new paradigm. This symposium, a lot of work went into this, as you can tell, and we want to continue. This is the mission of the academies. I would urge you to support us if you can, so that we can continue this. This will be probably the first annual Symbiosis Symposium. We have other events planned in the future, so stay tuned. Bookmark the website, keep track of what's going on, and thank you all so much for coming on and spending your Saturday with us. We hope to see you tomorrow as well. So I should let Annaliese or someone else say something.
Oh, thank you, Dennis, so much. And thank you for the vision that has helped to carried this forward. I want to thank all the team. It's been a tremendous amount of energy and effort to create this event, but worth every single very late night and early morning start. Thank you so much. And we've really risen to the intention of the Symbiosis Symposium, and really, encouraging this relationship with the human, nature, metaphysical, spirit aspects, the mycology, refugees. We've talked about centropic agroforestry, all these different themes that have been really deeply enriching and fostering a greater, wider sense of symbiosis for us all, because we all rely on the sum of all of our parts to be the best at who we can be. And I really liked seeing what Paul Stamets had to say about reinvesting in the biodiversity of nature and utilizing community to be the nexus of information. And this really speaks to what's in my heart, is that anytime you listen and look at any mainstream piece of information, if you were there, you pick it apart and say, that isn't how it was. No, that wasn't correct. And so any piece of information I've seen reported, it's never quite 100% true anyway. So it makes me think, okay, I really don't want to listen to that, but what can I listen to? What I can rely on is media information sharings like this. So this hub of reinvesting in community, reinvesting in our brilliant minds, and reinvesting in the positivity of these kind of opportunities on the planet. And this is what I want to put my energy into, is working with these kind of events and with the McKenna Academy. So thank you so much for the opportunity. And we are really living, all of us involved in this project, are really living 100% what we're showing up for. And I'm just so grateful to realize that today and see this event really get kind of pulling off. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Annaliese. Your presence has been such a massive unlock in expanding our understanding of the forest. And I'm really called to, as my permaculture teacher, Delvin Solkinson, really brought into my realm, was the concept that everything within permaculture, there's the idea of everything having highest functions. And when we can truly observe and identify the functions of people and plants and everything in our environment, then we can place that in a space where that person or plant can shine the most. And so looking at the idea that human beings are all plants within the ecosystem as well. In our own way, we are members of the ecosystem. And I believe that we all have our own unique highest function. And so what has really come to me during this day so far has been the tenet of listening, truly listening, to listen to ourselves, to listen to each other, to listen to nature as a whole, and to respond from there. And I think that's why each of us are here, Dennis, with the amount that you have had your ear close to the ground and that you listen so deeply to the message of the plants. And you as well, Annaliese, and each of us listening, okay, nature, how do I show up? How do I be my best self? And how do I help? And everyone who is in the audience, I want to thank you for listening and speaking and being curious and asking those questions. And I want to, as your fellow human, remind you so deeply that the way that you can be of service and your greatest joy lies within you, and that all we need to do is listen, because nature is that brilliant. She really is. And there's a whole lot of work we've got in between us and the perfect realization of that. And that's why we do it together. And it is such a blessing to come together to work on this as this project of repair and remediation and celebration together. So thank you all so much. It's been an incredible day. I'm so excited for tomorrow, and just really looking more and more at, I want more and more people to know how many people are up to good, and that we are so much more sovereign than sometimes that we're told, and that we are each empowered to make a difference. And like Mark Lakeman was saying in the very beginning, just start somewhere. That's all we need to do, is begin.
Yes, I'd like to say especially a special thanks to you, Genevieve, and Annaliese. You've been the ones out front. You've been the face of the Academy while we've had this incredible event. But I also want to thank the folks in the background, Anthony and James and Christina, making it all happen on the side and in the chat rooms. this is a collective effort. So I just want to give you all my profound thanks. And I think if we've tried to provide resources that you can take away and continue to learn from. And thanks to everybody who put in the links and, contributed their own. And, if I had to state some overarching lesson that I'm taking away here, the McKenna Academy of Natural Philosophy is our species' effort to understand our place in nature, to understand nature and the cosmos, and where do we fit in. And what if I had an internalized soundbite to take away from this, I would say that nature is intelligent. Nature speaks to us. Our task is to learn to listen. And we need to work on that because we haven't been listening enough or closely enough. So maybe this will help. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Thank you, Annaliese. Thank you to everybody involved. We really hope to see you tomorrow, and also know that the replays are available so you can come back at any time. Again, please do check out our website at www.mckenna.academy. And again, the resource collection there is such a gem. All of our speakers were generous enough to share things that they were personally inspired by. And some of these are more soul inspiration, and some of them are more educational resource oriented. And so definitely check that out. There's a well of knowledge and further avenues to continue this work and bring this momentum out of this weekend and into the rest of our lives. So we will see you tomorrow. Thank you all so much for being here.
Before we finish, I have one seal, and that is to bring in Terence McKenna. I have a quote of your dear brother, Dennis, to really, the McKenna Academy, the McKenna family. So Delvin Solkinson gave me this one when I asked him, give me one of your best. So Delvin, we're bringing you in this time, and Terence, we're bringing you in this time. Nature...
So did you settle on a quote?
So I'm going to speak it.
Okay.
Here goes.
I'm going to mute.
Nature loves courage. You make the commitment, and nature will respond to that commitment by removing impossible obstacles. Dream the impossible dream, and the world will not grind you under. It'll lift you up. This is the trick. This is what all these teachers and philosophers who really counted, who really touched that alchemical gold. This is what they understood. This is the shamanic dance in the waterfall. This is how magic is done, by hurling yourself into the abyss and discovering it's a feather bed.
Very good. He had the gift, didn't he?
Indeed. Thank you, Terence.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Annaliese, for that closing quote and ceremonial piece. And we thank you all so deeply. I hope everybody rests so well and has dreams that further the inspirations about how we can be our best plant selves in the forest and contribute to the whole just by being who we are. Thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow. All right. Bye-bye.